Okie dokie, everybody. Here we go. We are going live. Welcome to another round of Astro-Babble. We are here talking about astrology, talking about 8 specific charts that everybody has donated from Facebook and Instagram and all over the internets. Good morning, everybody. We are going to take those 8 charts and I have plugged them into my Astrofire Solar Fire Astro software. That's it. And we are going to read them cold. So I'm going to talk about what I see in the chart, how I read the chart, give you a little bit of guidance for those of you who sent in your charts. And if you or anybody that you know, like, trust, and have consent from, most importantly, would like to submit your info to the queue, just send in your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I do need that exact birth time, and I will add you to the list, and you will be featured on our little live stream show Monday through Friday. Let's go ahead and pop open a fizzy water, and we will get to it, shall we? Okay. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. I appreciate you so very much for joining me. Let's start with David's chart. Good morning, David, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for donating your chart to science. So David was born 3 p.m. in Birmingham. We have a Libra ascendant, which we've talked about in other videos, is just that lovely sugar coating on the chart. The ascendant is the major personality marker that we look for to indicate somebody's fundamental nature. And when we have Libra there, Libra is that peacekeeping, really pleasant is a good way to say it. That superficial coating of sweetness on the surface of the chart. We also have the moon in Libra here Okay, back up. So when we look at each planetary placement, there are lower levels and there are higher levels of that placement. There are octaves of expression, right, when we look at a natal chart. So in David's chart here, we have this moon in Libra, which on a helpful note is going to make the heart very geared towards helping others, instilling a sense of justice, instilling a sense of right and wrong, instilling a lot of compassion. Yeah. However, when we look at the lower expression of this moon in Libra in David's chart, one of the things that tends to come forward is indecision, and emotional waffling is a good way to say it. So that's just something to be aware of, especially because we have so much other air stuff in the chart. Interesting stuff with David is that he's put the ruler of his chart, because Venus is on the ascendant, we have the ruler of the chart being Venus, which represents the native in the chart. And that Venus in Gemini is up in the 9th house of travel, foreigners, and higher education. So we automatically know that that's where David is at his most comfortable, not only with that ascendant in Libra, moon in Libra, but he has a stellium in the 9th house in Gemini. He has Mercury in Gemini, Mars in Gemini, Sun in Gemini, and Venus in Gemini. That Venus, the lord of the chart, is also conjoined the sun at 28 degrees, making it a cazimi, which is Venus resting in the heart of the sun, and the sun is backlighting her ever so beautifully. It's the golden hour, as it was on 1 degree of either side of the sun, is known to be that cazimi formation, which is basically doubling Venus's power in the chart. So we have somebody who's naturally going to be very good with travel, very good with higher learning and education on the college advanced level, as well as interactions with foreigners and spirituality as well. This Venus in Gemini is retrograde, and what's even more interesting about this 9th house formation is at the time of this recording, Venus literally just went retrograde at like 2 in the morning this morning. So there's going to be an interesting doubling down of all of these topics with the 9th house in David's chart as Mercury comes in, as Venus and Mercury conjoin, and then as Mercury passes over all these placements that he has in the 9th house, and Venus then goes direct and moves back over all of these formations as well. So David, you've got a lot of self-development coming your way, for sure. But the idea that the 9th house is so packed and so associated with your chart, we need to understand that a lot of what you do and who you are is going to be predicated on this 9th house of travel, foreigners, and higher education, as well as spirituality. One of the interesting parts of your chart is we have this North Node in Cancer being ruled by the moon in the first, and I think that one of the things that you're supposed to be striving towards, David, is this idea of success and this idea of recognition for how much work you've put in to get where you are. Um, a lot of times when we see ninth house placements, but then the North Node is in the 10th, there's this idea of actually taking what you learn in the ninth house because it's a very scholastic house. It's a very studying house. And then putting it into work or finally being recognized for what it is that you've kind of spent your whole life doing and identifying with and researching and putting all of those air placements to work with. Because Venus, the ruler of the chart, is interestingly ruling Jupiter in Taurus in the 8th house of death, taxes, estates, business, as well as opposing Neptune in Scorpio retrograde in the 2nd house. That brings a really interesting dynamic in terms of like financial stability into the chart. Like a lot of what you're researching on that college level, a lot of what your life themes tend to surround yourself with is this idea of financial wealth and power. The idea of entrepreneurship, of being quote unquote like self-made is a very important part of your chart. Uh, but there's a cost to that. I think that one of the things we need to be aware of in your chart is that we have this Neptune and Scorpio retrograde, which gives you this feeling of like, because I'm studying basically how somebody almost in a way misuses or claws for power, there's this sense of weakness in the personal wealth department that I think needs to be rectified. Make sure that you don't have any negative associations with wealth, that you don't start to disassociate from your own financial stability in order to pursue this greater good, this higher expression of what you feel your life is supposed to be about. Because at the end of the day, like if your roots aren't stable, then the tree's going to topple over. It doesn't matter how great or how prosperous the tree is. If the roots are rotting underneath, that financial stability of your own personal idea of wealth is sacrificed because of these placements, then we can't necessarily work with them the way that we would want to. Yeah. And that's the basic message of the chart. There are a lot of other things that we could delve into one-on-one, but because the stelliums are so packed and they keep referring to first house of self, ninth house higher education, travel, foreigners, spirituality, ruling, eighth house of business, death, taxes, finance, moon in the first, ruling the 10th house of success, and then the second house with that Neptune Scorpio being pulled on by Mars and Gemini. There's just this constant reoccurring theme of study, learning, making success, but not too much success because of self-deprecation in the wealth department. Like that's the major message that the chart is saying first and foremost. Good morning, Tara, Danielle, Hetty, Raven. Thank you so much for jumping on. Everybody on Instagram as well. Jane, Celestial Melody, Breeze Holistic Wellness, Unfettered Faye, all of my peoples. Thank you. I appreciate it. We are moving on to chart number 2. Let's talk about Ella. Or L, sorry, L, just kidding. Hey, L, how you doing, darling? We've got 3:20 a.m. in Dorchester. Let's take a peek. Another Libra ascendant. Oh. 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 Okay. I see it. All right. I was worried there for 2 seconds because we got a Scorpio stellium in the 2nd house of finance, including the ruler of the chart, Venus and Scorpio. This is an excellent opportunity to talk about the power structure of the planets. So a lot of people who get into astrology for the first time, they start to think, oh, well, if I want to learn about relationships, I'll just look at my Venus. And if I just want to learn about finance, I'll look at Saturn or Jupiter or something. Not the case. Not the case, honey boo boo darling. So when we look at a planet is an energy, it's a force. It is also ruling parts of the chart. So planets represent locations and referral areas in the charts that need to be observed. In this case, because we have the ruler of the chart in the second house, there's going to be a major association in the personality with wealth. However, this is where L's chart starts to teach us about the power that a planet holds, yeah, and the degrees of health of a particular planet. In the last chart, we had Venus ruling the chart, but Venus was in Gemini, co-present with Mercury in Gemini, giving her kind of like spending the night in Gemini's house while Gemini is in the house, kind of making sure everything's going right. And then she was also in the heart of the sun, giving her a boost of power. However, in this chart with L, we have Venus who is literally just out of that heart of the sun, and Venus is combust the sun. So she is outside of that 1 degree orb on either side of the sun, being burnt up by the light of the sun. Venus is also in fall, Venus being in Scorpio, the sign that opposes her natural sign of Taurus, which she rules, which is a negative placement for her. We also have Pluto here, which is a difficult planet until about halfway through life, until it matures. And then we have Mercury in Scorpio, which gives a certain sharpness to the mind, but also tendency for the mind to get dark, to get broody, to get a little bit overly emotional, for the heart to overtake the head. Especially with that moon in Cancer up in the 10th, which we'll talk about. So I think the second house of finance, the idea of wealth, the idea of personal money and resources is a little bit more toxic than I personally like to see. And there are reasons for that toxicity that we'll get into, but just the idea of we have a very much in detriment ruler of the chart in the house of finance. So that's the major healing crisis that this chart is going to need to overcome, as opposed to a chart that is a little bit better placed, a chart that is a little bit more ideal. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses, but sometimes in a chart there's a sense of ease, yeah? And you could think about that in terms of somebody working off their karma in a previous life, and they're coming into this life to kind of enjoy the fruits of their labor, just because that's where they're at in the cycle of the wheel that is always turning. In this chart specifically, Elle's got work to do. She's got a lot of second house stuff, some wealth, finance, resource stuff to do, and there's a lot of detriment in this place that needs to be kind of shoveled and transmuted for her to reap the potential of her own natal chart. We do have this moon in Cancer up in the 10th house of success and fame. And I really enjoy that. And I think that this is one of the things that keeps Elle optimistic. It also keeps her compassionate. It also keeps Elle very focused on achieving a sense of mentorship from other role models, making sure that she surrounds herself with the right groups of people. However, we do have that trine, which is helping but not helping as much, between the moon in Cancer at 13 degrees and the sun in Scorpio at 14 degrees. So there's good formations, but unfortunately it's not really good enough to pull the chart out of the depths, but it does give some remediation emotionally that I think is rather helpful. One of the things that I think is really important to understand about Elle's chart is we have this sense of community support from Jupiter in Leo in the 11th. And then we have the North Node in Aquarius down in the 5th house of children, parenting, and creativity, ruled by Saturn in the 4th. And I think one of the things that Elle is actually going to be working on in this life is passing on her skills, her knowledge, her wisdom to the next generation, specifically to her children. And as that passing of the baton starts to really sink in Elle's chart, there's going to be a natural sense of venting all of these deeper, more hidden feelings that are in the chart, stuck in the second house of finance and wealth, because she starts to understand, hey, the universe does support and the universe does provide, and despite my outlook, I will always have some semblance of right and wrong. I will always have some semblance of what needs to be done versus what does not need to be done, and I can always move forward in a way that is not just helping me, but helping me plant the seeds for the next generation to come. And I think that especially if we wanted to think about remediation for Elle's chart, the idea of volunteering, of working with social groups, of specifically working with children, that would be an excellent way to remediate some of this stuckness, because there's a lot of heaviness in this second house, but the heaviness can be transmuted through the lightness of children. Like the idea of you just watching a 2-year-old be so freaking carefree and not worry about bills and not worry about income and not worry about debt. Like just the idea of those issues not existing in their pretty little heads, and just letting that innocence kind of wash over your spirit to pull you out of that second house. I think that that's one of the ways that we might be able to work with that, whether that's your own children or working in a in like a working in a scholastic setting, working especially with organizations, humanitarian efforts, social groups who give back to children in some way, shape, or form. But we need to bring a little bit of that innocence into the chart, activate the moon in Cancer via that empathy in the 10th house, which is very, very present, and take it from there. Cool. Thanks, Elle. I appreciate you donating your chart. Thank you, Raven, L, Sandy, for jumping on. I appreciate you so very much. We are moving on to chart number 3. We have Pauline. So Pauline was born 6 p.m. in... Girl, what is this? Drumshambo? Drumshambo. I'm going to say it like an American. Drumshambo. Yeah, I don't even know. A 3rd Libra ascendant? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? This is what's so interesting about this whole live stream thing, is y'all submit your charts, your chart info at the randomest times, and I get messages at all hour of the night. Add me to the queue, Sam. Some of y'all aren't even polite. Some of y'all aren't even polite. You just send in your information. I'm not complaining. This is fun. I'm not complaining. But it's random. And yet we have 3 Libra ascendants in a row. And then Venus is also in Gemini, like the first chart. In the 9th house. Goodness. Like, so interesting how it all works out like that. But the different flavors are present in the chart because there are other planets to consider besides just ascendant and ascendant ruler. In this case, we have, again, Venus in the 9th house of travel, higher education, foreigners, spirituality, indicating that this person is very much attached. Pauline is very attached to this idea of 9th house topics, right? However, we have Neptune in Libra retrograde in the 1st. Which brings us into a little bit of interesting territory, especially because I'm seeing multiple medical placements in the chart. So we have Neptune in Libra. Libra is the sign of the kidneys, as well as the hormones in medical astrology. Then we have the moon in Pisces in the 6th house of health, and Pisces is the sign of the lymphatic system. Yeah. So on a physical level, one thing that I would really like to warn Pauline about is her tendency to swell and be prone to issues with the kidneys, especially due to chemical sensitivity. I would highly, highly suggest that she not ingest large amounts of caffeine because her body is just extra sensitive to any sort of kidney stimulation. Alcohol is very difficult for this body type. And again, the one symptom that's going to keep coming up forward in this chart because of Pauline's kidney association in the 1st house of body and her lymphatic association in the 6th house of health is this idea of swelling, especially in the extremities, because Venus is in Gemini in that medical realm. And the moon is making a square to that south node, which is interesting, in Gemini in the 9th. Yeah. What's interesting about the 9th house placement of Venus, where we're putting the ruler of the chart in that travel, that higher learning, that culture, that foreigners place, but we have the south node here. And the south node is that marker for personality that tells us that we're receiving a draining in that area. There's a lack of resources whenever we try to approach these topics. There is an energy suck, basically, when it comes to that placement. Versus the north node is really where we're striving. It's where we gain momentum. It's where we kind of put our foot on the gas and we're really kind of moving towards that place in the chart. And so that place that Pauline is actually moving to is this third house of writing, teaching, communication. Now we do have Saturn here, so this isn't going to be a house that evolves quickly. This is going to be something that, especially around age 30, Pauline will start to have access to. Pauline will start to unfold, but it won't be easy, and it won't be something that comes naturally. Instead, that third house of writing, teaching, communication will eventually start to make sense, but in the beginning, first 30 years of life especially, it will be a hidden talent, is a good way to say it. A lot of those hidden talents were actually brought about by family stuff. We have an interesting relationship between the third house, fourth house, seventh house here. Third house, writing, teaching, communication is being ruled uh, is ruling rather this Mars in Capricorn in the fourth house of family. And I think one of the things that Polly needs to understand is that family was actually a lot more influential than she gives them credit for, especially when it comes to this third house of skill set. We need to respect that the lineage of the family is going to be important in the writing, teaching, communication. In fact, sharing a family story or working with, again, ideas, concepts, thoughts, words that were passed down from generation to generation, investigating the bloodline, potentially setting up an ancestral altar, all things we would potentially want to do to honor that third house, fourth house connection. But that Mars in Capricorn is ruling Mercury in Aries and Sun in Aries in the seventh, which I'm not necessarily a fan of because Mercury is combust. But the idea of the seventh, fourth house connection is an interesting one because it means that you'll be introduced to your spouse via the family dynamic. So when I tell this to clients, one of the things that I naturally kind of give an example of is your family decides to throw a party or invite some random stranger to dinner. And at this event, you are introduced to somebody who is a potential love interest, and that love interest ends up working out. And that's kind of the dynamic between seventh house, fourth house. Jupiter is in Leo, retrograde in the 11th, with the moon in Pisces in the 6th. That's how do I feel about that? So we've got this interesting 11th house of social groups, of friendships that has this Jupiter in Leo. Like Pauline, the company that you keep is an absolute riot. They're just so big and over the top, your friends. However, a lot of your social connections are influenced and connected to your house of work, health, pets. So in that dynamic, we would need to understand that like a lot of your work needs to be with people who you find socially pleasing. Yeah. But because of that, because of the bridges that you're uniquely able to build, that's how you climb in the organization, because that moon in Pisces is ruling the 10th house of career success, which I find fun in the chart. And I think that goes back to your this Libra ascendant personality, which gives you just this sweetness, this likability. Yeah. But you can also use that likability in a work dynamic to win friends and influence people, is a good way to say it. But again, we're really moving towards this third house of writing, teaching, communication, potentially investigating some of the family ties, working with that, the relationships that you hold intimately, very much connected with the family as well. And there's this competitive nature to the relationships as well when it comes to your spouse of choice. All of this Aries, solar, Mercury energy. There's a lot of competition, there's a lot of striving, there's a lot of get up and go, there's a lot of action, there's a lot of just Aryan tendencies, that cardinal fire that just tends to light a fire under the butt of the relationship. It's not going to be boring by any stretch of the means when it comes to choosing a life partner. Excellent. So that is that. Thank you everybody for jumping on. Yes, exactly. Not the monkeys, Sandy. Thank you. So we are on chart number 4 right now. So Robert was born 6:58 p.m. in Albuquerque. That one I know how to say. Oh, we got a family man. So Robert has Scorpio ascendant. Props to all my Scorpio risings. which is always really interesting when we see the sun in Taurus, which a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I'm a this sign or I'm a that sign," and they're talking about the sun sign. But in this chart specifically, we have the sun in Taurus, but we have this hidden Scorpio side that Robert has, which makes him slightly broody, a little bit mysterious and mischievous, a little bit interested in the underbelly, the underworld, the occult of the shadow side of society. But because Mars is ruling the chart and Mars is in Aquarius in the fourth house of family, we have, and the North Node is here, which I absolutely love, the idea of Robert specifically choosing to focus on family this go around in the life journey. The idea of family being so important to him, so viscerally a part of his makeup. I just find that absolutely lovely because we have that fourth house of family and home connected to that sixth house of work as well. We also have Venus and Mercury here, indicating a very quick mind and a very personable nature, but also a very competitive nature, especially when it comes to working with a spouse. Goodness, you've roped in the whole family to your dynamic, Robert. I'm kind of impressed by it because your house of work is connected to your house of family, so working in the family business and or working with family. But then also your seventh house of relationships in Taurus is ruled by Venus and Aries in your sixth house of work. So like every aspect you do, because you're such a family oriented individual, like, oh, got me a spouse, that spouse, we're going into business together, oh, family's coming along, we're doing business together. Everything is interwoven into like never being far from family, which is going to make it super difficult from the kids when they want to leave the nest. But anyway, we won't talk about that. Especially with that fifth house in Pisces, goodness, they're going to be all mutable and you're not going to know what to do with that. Yeah, also kids are going to be a little bit of a financial drain. And really just make you question physical wealth and resources and time, because we've got this Jupiter Sag retrograde, which is excellent, although it's retrograde, and it's conjoined Neptune and Sag retrograde, ruling the fifth house of children. I think that's going to be messy. It's going to be hard to balance and spread the butter over the toast a little bit evenly when it comes to kids. And you're going to have to realize that, hey, they're going to do their own thing regardless of what you say, darling. One of the things I would advise, though, Robert, is we have Jupiter in Sag, which is one of the most positive placements that we could have in the financial house. I'm a big fan of that. But Jupiter is retrograde and touching Neptune, which is a planet that brings a lot of muddiness and communication issue. When it comes to the financial house, I don't like to see that placement too much. So I would highly, highly encourage you to have somebody else touch your money, to have somebody else do your taxes, because Neptune will act like this in any house, but especially in finances. There's this moment where you sit down to do the money, to do the money thing, to balance the books, and then you turn it over to the government and they're like, you forgot this whole freaking section. And you're like, no, I looked it over 3 times. You missed the whole freaking section. How did you do that? Neptune. And so we need to just let somebody else touch the money, Robert. That's just something that you're gonna need to work on. Be a little bit more distanced with your own wealth and delegate, honey. Not everything needs to stay in the family. And I hate to break it to you, but that's kind of the way it is. It's one thing to know, like, and trust somebody. It's another thing to be bloodline specific and to say, if somebody's not in our family unit, then they're not going to be good at XYZ. That's a lie. Especially from an astrological perspective, I hate to break it to you, but the idea of people being similar because they're in the same family, not necessarily correct. Everybody's natal chart can have synastry with family members, which is often what happens, but especially when we see everybody's unique individual characteristics, especially when they're young, especially when they feel threatened or stressed, they repress certain aspects of the chart. So in some cases, the family dynamic can be hiding or repressing various characteristics that can only be expressed outside of the family unit. And I think that especially when it comes to finances, we want to give that to somebody else who, again, like trust for sure, but just the idea of you surrendering some of that responsibility to others so that they can take a whack at it. We do have this moon in Virgo with Pluto in Virgo retrograde in the 11th house of friendships. Makes you, again, very personable. I enjoy that. Makes you very detail-oriented. You enjoy friends who are very detail-oriented, people who are always on time, people who are always neat, pressed, who are always looking to better themselves and the world around them, people who are slightly nitpicky, you get along with really well, detail-oriented individuals. But because we have this Mercury in Aries ruling the 11th house of friendships, again, you tend to rope your friends into business with you. Not everything has to be a family activity, Robert, and I say that with as much love as I can possibly muster. But again, because you're so focused on building the family, I applaud you for connecting and weaving the web so close. But we need to let that web breathe a little bit, and we need to give people space, and we need to understand there are many different ways that somebody can become family, and somebody does not need to be involved in every little thing that you do just because you enjoy them. So that's that. Thank you, everybody. Good morning, Melina. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. So we're halfway through. We've done 4 charts. We've got 4 more to go. Let me just remind you, if you would like to be a part of the queue, just send in your birth date, place an exact birth time to me via private message, and I will add you to the queue. And I will message you the morning of when your chart is being featured. If you would like to book a private consult with me, you can always go to ScorpioRisingAstrology.com and check out the online classes if you're interested in learning astrology, as well as the previous live stream videos are on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, the website, and that'll pull up the channel, and you'll be able to see all the other charts that we've talked about. Cool. Okay, let's talk about Koli. So we've got Koli, sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, born 5:23 a.m. in Soldanta. I like that, actually. Soldatna, I think. I don't know. Ooh, that's interesting. Ooh, I like it. So dynamic. Ooh, for sure. Oh, goodness gracious. We've got so much to talk about. So we've got this ascendant in Virgo, right? Virgo is surrounded by Venus in Virgo on one side, and then Mars in Virgo on the other side. And then we have this moon, this Sun and Mercury in Libra, making a mutual reception via Mercury and Venus in the second house of finance. Oh, it's glorious. I absolutely love it. Can't get enough of it. The idea, finance and wealth seem to be a theme. Anybody else picking up on that? Really weird. So whenever we have the ruler of the chart, in this case, because Virgo is the ascendant, Mercury in Libra in the second house of finance is the ruler of the chart. And the ruler of the chart is in the second house of wealth. Because of that, there is a high association with wealth, with material possessions, with ownership, with just money in general, especially because we have the Sun in Libra here, and both Venus and the Sun Venus is ruling both the Sun and Mercury in the second house. Yes. Thank you, everybody who is messaging me and making my phone go all buzzy. Then we go to... Yeah, we need to talk about this Venus, Koli, for 2 seconds. So Venus naturally does not like to be in Virgo. She does not. This is actually a sign of her detriment. It's the least favorite sign of Venus. Think of this. This goddess, Venus, she who is all things lovely, my lady, is in this like really tight-knit, slightly anal, very picky, very detail-oriented sign of Virgo. It's kind of like taking all of that voluptuous goddess energy and putting it in a mini skirt, glasses, pulling her hair up, and turning her into a Karen. Yeah? Good way to think about it. Venus does not like to be a Karen. She is the goddess of unconditional love. She does not like to put conditions on the love, and Virgo makes her put conditions on the love, is a good way to think about it. So we need to just work with that archetype just a little bit, my dear. We need to understand that you are a goddess, and you do not deserve to put certain rules and restrictions on your potential, because your potential is limitless. Limitless. Now, there is something to be said about your work ethic. Your work ethic is pristine. It is glorious. I love you for your work ethic. I think it's absolutely flawless. However, we need to balance you letting your hair down with you putting your hair up. Yeah? We need to express both this Venus and this Mars in equal proportion. We need to know when to stop and smell the roses and when to go and burn the village. Yeah? So, just that. Burn the village is a little bit aggressive. Mars in Virgo is a little bit more about like plowing the fields, planting the crops, harvesting the grain. It's that farmer archetype when Mars is in Virgo as well as Taurus, those earth signs. Yeah, so that's that. What else do we want to talk about in the chart? Family stuff as well. We've got fourth house Jupiter and Aquarius being ruled or ruling this Uranus and Sagittarius in the fourth. Family life was really unpredictable, and I think that that's one of the reasons why you locked down so hard on your own internal playbook. Like, the rules that you set for yourself, honey, are there for a reason, for sure, and a good reason, specifically, because that Uranus and Sagittarius just made everything all over the place in the fourth house of family. And I think that's one of the reasons why you chose a job that you can also exercise that kind of Aquarian level genius that you have when it comes to organizing, ordering, focusing, and becoming prosperous through restriction is a good way to think about that. Yeah, I mean, you're known for this wealth house, like this Venus ruling Mercury in Libra in the second is also that triggering that 10th house, because that 10th house is being ruled by that Mercury via Gemini. Like, lots of wealth signatures in your chart for sure. Also associated with higher learning, travel, and foreigners, that Venus in Virgo is tripping that 9th house. 9th house also has the North Node, the idea of you specifically becoming a teacher on the college level. Yeah, or working with people who are foreigners who engage a lot in travel, spiritual studies. But I think we're looking a little bit more on the college level, just the way the chart is working out. Well, that's interesting. We have the Moon in Pisces, separating from an opposition from Mars, thankfully. But that Moon in Pisces in the 7th house of relationships means that you're attracted to somebody who's very emotional, very intuitive, who doesn't have the same boundaries and restrictions that you put on yourself. In fact, you are in awe of their, not impulsiveness, but their adaptability, their flexibility, their go with the flow mentality. However, one of the ways that you're going to meet this individual is via your work. And I think that that's going to be simultaneously glorious and frustrating, because you have such a work ethic that's super strong. We have this Jupiter ruling your 7th house from the 6th of work, where it's going to be you running into this partner via the workplace, via your workplace or their workplace, especially if they're associated with that other 6th house topics of health and pets as well. But running into your partner via that 7th house and 6th house connection, for sure. Yeah. What else? We're gonna need to get somebody to proof your writing. We've got this Saturn in Scorpio, South Node Scorpio, Pluto Scorpio, all being ruled by this Mars and Virgo in the first. I think we need to get somebody to look over any written material that you make before you send it, just because there tend to be these Scorpio undertones that people read into, which makes you seem a lot more malicious than you actually are. Thanks. But I mean, you've got so much focus. I'm jealous of the focus that you have. Like it's such a beautiful chart placement with with the first and second house of self and wealth being so interconnected, and then that branching out into the different areas of the chart to stimulate growth and success. I love it. Good stuff. Everybody sending me messages, blocking out my screen. Thank you so much. Okay. We are on to Nathalie. So Nathalie was born 2:01 a.m. in Elizabeth. Ooh, girl, you are an ultra Capricorn. That is ridiculous. Okay, so again, the idea of your sun sign being just a very small part of what makes up your personality, this is an excellent chart to display that tendency, because we've got the ascendant in Capricorn, and then we've got Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn, right on the ascendant. Saturn's at 25 degrees, ascendant is at 26 degrees. They're 1 degree apart, so close, which makes you like a super earth sign person, but also makes you a little bit more Capricorn than Taurus. So I would read for Capricorn as well as Taurus in your daily horoscope. We've also got this really spunky moon in Aries down in the 4th, which we'll get to. I find that really interesting. Super interesting dynamics. You have such a powerful presence when it comes to this Saturn in Capricorn. You know, not easy growing up. Capricorn, for the first especially 16 but 30 years of life, tends to be physically very withered, very unhealthy as a child, not because of anything that people can really diagnose or put their finger on, but just Capricorn is one of those signs that tends to be a very sickly child, a very weak child. But as they grow, as they mature, they really mature like a fine wine. And the older that they get, the stronger that they get, until, like, especially when they're in their 60s, around that second Saturn return, they start to be this impenetrable force that really has so much momentum that's built slowly over time in the life. But this also comes with a couple issues here and there. Again, we have associations with wealth, because that second house has the north node of finance, so being financially independent, something that you're striving towards. But this Saturn, as well as Uranus and Neptune in the first house of self, I think there's a lot about Nathalie's chart that makes people very intimidated. Because there's this sense of power, there's this sense of groundedness, there's this sense of authority that you just can't fake when it comes to having such a strong and stern Capricorn placement right on the front. Nathalie takes zero bullshit. Absolutely zero. Makes her a terrible child as well from a parental perspective, unless they understand that Capricorn tendency. And paired with this Sun in Taurus in the 5th, and this stationed Mercury in Taurus in the 5th, there's a lot of interesting earth sign dynamics in Nathalie's chart, where her mind is also very stubborn. Like, she's got Mercury, the planet of the mind, in this fixed earth sign of Taurus, which is stationed in the 5th house of children, parents, as well as sexuality, creativity. Like, when she makes her mind up, there is absolutely zero changing it. And chances are she made her mind up before you even said anything. FYI, any potential partners, that's a thing. What you say has no merit. She's already run the numbers. It's already a thing. She's already placed an order behind your back because she knows what's right. And honestly, she is kind of right almost all the time. That's one of the like not so cool things about dealing with people with really heavy Capricorn placements, is you fight them tooth and nail about them being wrong, but at the end of the day, they're 99.98% always right. So that's a thing. We do have interesting dynamics in the 3rd, 4th house, because this Mars in Pisces, this Venus in Pisces, the sign of her exaltation, this Mars in Pisces is also ruling the moon in Aries in the 4th house. I think there's this really deep connection with siblings. There's also this really creative writing streak. You would make an excellent teacher, just because the 6th house of work is being ruled by this Mercury in Taurus in the fifth of children, working with children definitely, but this Mars ruling the moon in the fourth, just the idea of you writing, teaching, communicating in a way that deals with family, interacting with the parent dynamic. I think you'd be a really good teacher, especially a teacher with everything that's happening COVID. Like, you'd be a great stay-at-home teacher, a virtual teacher. I think that would be something that you would succeed in wildly, actually. There is a really strong association between this moon in Aries and this Jupiter in Cancer in the seventh house. Your spouse that you married is an absolute teddy bear. Absolute teddy bear. Jupiter is in its exaltation in Cancer, loves to be in Cancer. Jupiter makes things big, and that heart on that spouse that you choose to spend the rest of your life with is absolutely 100% massive. And it melts you every single time without fail, Nathalie. I guarantee it. Which pairs well, because this Saturn on the ascendant and this Aries moon and this Taurus in the fifth is somewhat drill sergeanty. You know, like you are very strict, lady. You know what you want done, and you don't have any qualms about barking orders to get it done. And I think that this is why the spouse that you've chosen is such a softie, is such a big commanding Jupiterian presence, but has this just really gushy feeling to them that softens your rough edges, and where you get to play bad cop, they get to play good cop. And that dynamic works really well. It does bring conflict, but does work really well. And also the idea of you bringing in a spouse who is absolutely 100% convinced that they want to start a family and want to have children with you, that is non-negotiable. Okay. Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for jumping in. I appreciate you supporting the live stream. We've got two more. So let's talk about Ryan. So we've got Ryan, who was born 11:57 a.m. in Tampa. Okay, we've got this Leo ascendant, but this Leo ascendant has the South Node. Oh, and the Sun in Taurus is ruling it with Mercury retrograde in Taurus in the 10th. Interesting. Yep, Jupiter in Cancer in the 12th. We've got stuff to talk about here. Ooh, the family issues. Born on a full moon in Scorpio in the 4th house of family, conjunct Pluto in Scorpio, retrograde in the 4th. Ryan, what did you decide to do? You incarnated with such a toxic family dynamic. Honey, why did you do that to yourself? That's crazy. Oh my goodness. I can't even believe you did that. Like, I get it. You've got this Jupiter in Cancer in the 12th house. Like, clearly, one of the things that you're working on this time around is healing the bloodline, is a good way to say it. Like, you're really, really focused this time around on turning the narrative and really making sure that you are the last person that any of these family events happen to, period. But this shit is toxic. Absolutely toxic. And you got to respect that. However, it's also one of the biggest things that forges your personality. You know, we have this ascendant in Leo with the South Node. You know, you being on all the time is a major energy suck, especially because you keep being thrown into positions of power, success, and authority. And that's something when we see the ruler of the chart, in this case the Sun, being in Taurus in the 10th house of success, despite the fact that you feel that you're terribly unqualified, that you are not the best person for the job, that you fundamentally lack the paper and the skills to do this job, you are given that job anyway. And let me tell you something really funny. The reason why you are given that job, Ryan, is because the person who would have taken that job if you were not in it would have been absolutely rude, disgusting, mean, and terrible. Yeah? And you as a person, you're perceived as this powerful being, even though you don't always see that power yourself. And people also see this sensitivity, this full moon in Scorpio, and they're like, he would never hurt us. Yeah? We trust him. naturally. It's just something that happens in your chart. And you're like, but I have all these secrets, I have all this baggage, I have all this stuff that I need to work through. And they look at you and they say, exactly, we know. Yeah, we see it. And that sight, that ability to assume power, but also to maintain the vulnerability that your job requires for you to hold that power, for you to continue to be humble because of the baggage that you've incurred in this lifetime, is exactly why people trust you. It's a thing. Look it up. You can't look it up. It's something that I'm telling you that you've probably heard for the first time so succinctly. This is years of therapy that I'm saving you, Ryan. So when we look at your chart, especially, I think one of the things that we need to respect is that death is a part of life. Yeah. Death is something that happens naturally. It's something that we can't change, but it's also not something to be feared. It's also something that can be a very healing process. And it's also a business. Yeah. Death is something that happens as a cycle of life that can be respected, that can be utilized, that can be transmuted, that can be appreciated. And this Venus and Aries, ruled by this Mars and Pisces, Venus in the ninth house of travel, foreigners, higher education, Mars in this eighth house of death, taxes, business estates. I think you learning that progressively throughout the life will teach you that, you know, the death of family members especially is sobering, but also, you know, it can be very healing, and it can allow you to open up doors and open up spiritual contact and open up your personality and experience different cultures in a way that would not be possible had those forces still been on the board in your life. Yeah, so that's a thing. Working with your spouse, going into business with your spouse could be a thing. We have this this Saturn in Capricorn retrograde ruling the seventh house of relationships. Actually, one of the major goals of your life, Ryan, is to be in a stable relationship where nothing goes wrong ever. And we know how not correct that is. In terms of an ideal, but that doesn't stop you from pursuing and working on that relationship. I think that your work ethic is absolutely astounding, and I think that one of the things that makes your relationships work, especially your intimate relationships, is how much you're willing to give quality time, because you understand how important it is to salvage relationships that you care about, so that they don't become that toxic fourth house energy. I highly suggest that you maybe reach out for a consult and we talk about this a little bit more, because I got lots more to say and not any more time to say it. So thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you and wish you the best of luck on your journey. We have one more chart. Let's talk about Anne. So Anne comes in, and Anne, we have 2:50 p.m. in the Bronx. Here we've got a Leo ascendant with Moon in Leo very close, as well as Uranus in Leo retrograde in the first. All of that being ruled by the Moon in Pisces, Mercury Pisces. Ooh, Mercury Pisces retrograde. And South Node in the eighth. This is another chart that experiences a lot of that death aspect, a lot of entrepreneurial tendencies for sure. On the negative side, it's the idea of attention grabbing because of what is lost. But on the higher octave of the experience, it's using the dynamic personality in order to generate income via other people's resources, that entrepreneurial energy. I don't like the idea of Mercury in Pisces retrograde in the eighth house of death. I mean, this could be really strong mediumship qualities, but it could also bring about this idea of the mind constantly, the subconscious, especially the intuitive influences, constantly messing with the logic. It could represent speech issues, dyslexia, things where the mental faculties, the verbal faculties are reversed, muddied, or confused with this Mercury in Pisces retrograde, especially because it's combust the sun in the eighth house of death, taxes, estates, and business. Yeah, that's a little bit weird. of a placement to come forward, especially because that Mercury is ruling the second house of finance. And the North Node is here and Pluto's here. Halfway through the life, we're going to start to understand what money actually is. But unfortunately, there's this terrible fear and this terrible almost a despising of power and wealth and resources, despite wanting to have those power and wealth and resources. So this entrepreneurial tendency is mirrored by this financial toxicity, this idea of toxic wealth, of money that is dirty. And I think that needs to be rectified, but it'll only really be rectified halfway through the life because Pluto is there. We've got Neptune and Scorpio retrograde in the 4th. That's addiction in the home. That's chemical sensitivities in the home. That's medications being brought into the home at a very early age, which potentially is why there was such a brilliant personality, because that brilliant personality is the equal and opposite of pain. And I think that that's something that a lot of people say, oh, well, I have negative placements in my chart. And let me tell you this, let me have a heart-to-heart with you as somebody who has Scorpio rising with Pluto on the ascendant. Yeah, one of those planets that's associated with death and toxicity and the underworld, rar, and ruled by Mars and Aries in the 6th house of work. Like, my chart is the definition of the Grim Reaper. However, one of the things that we have to understand is that experiencing pain also allows us the capacity for happiness. They are connected. Yeah. I almost feel sorry for people who don't come in with a certain amount of baggage, because if you don't understand the lowest of the low, you can't understand the highest of the high. Yeah, that is a trade-off. That is an experience that we see in the chart, and especially in Anne's chart. There's a great line in the show The Magicians. Magic doesn't come from happiness; it comes from pain. And that's I think something that's very, very present in especially the past 2 charts that we saw. The idea of all of this Leo energy in Anne's chart, this unpredictable Uranus, this very flamboyant personality that brings so much light and so much joy into the darkness of people's lives, also comes from this depth of sorrow in the 4th house of family because of this Neptune in Scorpio retrograde in the 4th. What else do we want to talk about? Y'all are really, really harping on this 7th house, 6th house placement. Oh gosh, I don't know how many times I can say it and how many different ways I can say it, but the idea of, in this chart specifically, we have Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn in the 6th house, ruling the 7th house of relationships, where Venus and Mars are co-present. Especially when I see Venus and Mars co-present in the 7th, there is an idea of relationships potentially involving gender issues, the idea of bisexuality, the idea of polyamory, the idea of having multiple partners, and especially partners who are able to fulfill different roles in the life, especially from a work dynamic. The idea of having a work wife, a work husband, whether or not those turn into actual relationships, but they most likely will, because Venus and Mars in the 7th house, unless you find somebody who can embody both of those energies equally, it's perfectly okay, and for you to venture outside of traditional relationship norms and say, look, this person makes me feel this way, this person makes me feel that way, I would like to feel both at the same time, please. There is no stigma against that, especially in the society that we're going into. I think that that's a beautiful expression of the Venus Mars in your 7th being ruled by the 6th, but we need to make sure those relationships are practical, that they're actually bringing you value, that they are allowing you to pursue a lot of your dreams, your work, your creativity, especially because that Venus in Aquarius is ruling that 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, and that Jupiter in the 6th is ruling that 5th house of creativity. There's a lot of that inspiration that needs to come through your work and your relationships to help keep you going. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you, Anne. I appreciate your chart and the lessons that you shared via your placements. But that is pretty much all that I have to give. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. If you would like to if you would like to join the queue, please send your birth date, place, and exact birth time to me via private message only. Do not leave it in the comments. All of these are recorded. You can watch the replay via my Instagram, my Facebook. I'll put these on YouTube as well. I also, on Facebook, put the link to the YouTube channel in the comments of the live stream. If you would like to book a private consult, you can do so via ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, which is my website. And you can also learn astrology via the online courses that I have through that website. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for watching. I love you all. And may the stars be ever in your favor.